Hello and welcome back to the Eat Until We Feel Sick podcast. I'm Ann Diesel. I've had 3 bowls of Honey Nut Cheerios and I feel terrible. Hannah?
I've had half of a Pop-Tart and I don't feel terrible yet, but I'm sure I will at some point.
But you ate that Pop-Tart very recently.
Yeah.
In fact, I questioned when you pushed down the toaster, I was like, we are recording within minutes. You're going to wolf down that Pop-Tart before we record?
Yeah. Because I know, like, sitting here for an extended period of time, I'm going to get hungry and then I'm going to wish that I ate something.
Well, it's your reward for getting through a real tough podcast.
Oh, it's so tough.
Ugh, sorry to hear that. Anyway, today we're here to talk about one of the strangest paced movies that I've ever seen in my life that also happens to take place in San Francisco. No, it's not The Room. I know you were thinking that. It is Vertigo.
Vertigo, yes.
Yes. Which is about a man named Jimmy who is just bopping around, doesn't know which way is up.
Which way is down. He's just doing his thing.
I don't think the guy's got a clue.
I don't think he's got a clue, honestly.
Yeah. So, according to one Internet Movie Database, this is what Vertigo is about. A former San Francisco police detective juggles wrestling with his personal demons and becoming obsessed with the hauntingly beautiful woman he has been hired to trail, who may be deeply disturbed. Isn't that right, Hannah?
I mean, she may.
She may. One of them definitely is.
They both are, for different reasons.
Somewhat. One definitely more than the other.
Who's to say?
Well, we are about to say. So, as I said previously, I saw this in high school. I've only seen it once. I was like 15 or 16. This is about 10 or so years ago. And I really, really hated it. And this was right after coming off of Psycho and Rear Window.
2 different films, for
sure. 2 very different films. But in fact, Rear Window does star Jimmy Stewart, which I loved. I really loved Rear Window, and I liked Jimmy Stewart in it.
It's such a different movie, though.
Yeah. But my first time, I mean, I'll get into it a bit more later, but my first time watching my first time watching Vertigo, I was really put off by Jimmy Stewart. Just this whole, like, stupid way of talking.
That's Jimmy Stewart.
His character. And watching it a second time, giving it a second look, I have some opinions. But you had not seen it at all. I asked what you expected before we dove into it. You were kind of close, I would say. So you go ahead and lay out all your thoughts. And you can get through whatever you want to say, and I will hold my thoughts back until you're completely through. So 3, 2, 1, go.
I feel like maybe one of your criticisms of Jimmy Stewart is that he kind of hams it up on camera. But from my perspective of then, films from the 50s, shows from the 50s, things were a lot more heightened and melodramatic back then, in my experience.
So, yeah, well, I agree. Okay, I said I would hold back my opinion. Keep going.
Okay, because, like, if you watch, like, Rebel Without a Cause with James Dean, it's like, that's melodramatic. And it's like, James Dean is great in that film, but he's really hamming it up. I got the bullets.
Well, that's like, a great scene.
You're tearing me apart. And it's like,
hey, we're back to The Room again.
Yeah. See, that's the kind of, like, the big heightened thing. And that's just part of Jimmy Stewart's thing as well. And in the first scene when he was, like, juggling the cane, which is crazy. And then he was talking about how he could get vertigo from, like, being at a desk and dropping a pencil and then picking it up again. He gave me very Dick Van Dyke energy.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I'll say I have no problem with melodrama in general.
In general.
Yeah.
Then what's your problem with Jimmy Stewart?
Well, I will say, again, I'll save my opinions until after you give your spiel. But I will give a little hint and say that my opinion the first time watching it versus the second time watching it some things have changed.
Okay. Interesting.
in interesting ways.
Well, I'm curious because a 16-year-old versus a 26-year-old watching a film, you're going to be on a different perspective of it. And also, like, the viewing circumstances. Did you watch it on a DVD in, like, a crowded room? Or did you, like, we watched this high definition on our largish TV, different circumstances.
Yeah. In high school, I watched it. Well, it was probably a DVD projected on a screen in our classroom with a class full of students.
Fancy. I wish I had a class like that.
We also watched a couple episodes of Batman in that class.
Because
I think, like, Batman the Animated Series. Because I don't know, I guess we ran out of stuff to watch that day, and we didn't have anything to do, and they were actually my episodes of Batman. I had them on a hard drive.
Of course you did.
I don't know, I guess I was, like, selected to pick what we would watch.
Nice.
And I picked the episode Almost Got Him from Batman the Animated Series, which is an awesome episode where the main villains are sitting around a poker table, and they each tell a story about how they almost killed Batman, but then he got out of it right at the last second.
Sounds like a cool episode.
It's a really good episode.
In high school, we did like a movie day every Friday in shop class because I guess there's not enough to learn in shop class.
I had a similar experience. My shop class teacher in high school also played movies.
That's interesting. So we were allowed to bring in movies,
yeah.
And then we would vote on them, and then we would watch them in class, and a couple of mine got chosen, such as Napoleon Dynamite and Toy Story 3.
Oh, nice. My shop teacher really liked sci-fi movies. And he said that the greatest sci-fi movie ever made was Blade Runner, which I very much disagreed with. But I kept an emergency DVD copy of Star Wars in my backpack.
Emergency?
For emergencies, yeah. And I kept asking him to put it on, and he refused because I guess he felt that Star Wars did not hold a candle to Blade Runner at all.
That seems like an odd opinion.
But he had no issues throwing on Men in Black.
I mean, that sounds like a fun time.
Well, I mean, what's your barometer for sci-fi movies if you're like, okay, right at the top of the list, we got Blade Runner. Then somewhere in the middle, Men in Black. Then all the way at the bottom, Star Wars. Like, how dare you, sir?
Was he like a hipster contrarian? Like, oh, I don't like Star Wars because everyone else does?
No, he was just like an old dude.
Oh, well.
Old enough that I had a business teacher who, he was a fairly young teacher, but he went to the school when he was in high school, he went to that same school that he then taught at, and that teacher who loves Blade Runner was still a teacher back then.
That's got to be a weird role reversal.
Yeah.
You're a teacher and now you're like peers.
Yeah.
Odd. Now we're getting pretty off track, so let's get
wrong with that?
Back on track.
What else did my teachers do? Yeah. Anyway, we also watched The Illusionist in that class. The Illusionist and...
You're the only person I know who's seen that movie.
Well, I didn't really love it. But it was part of a unit where my teacher was like, sometimes two movies are released at the same time. They're about similar things. So we're going to watch The Illusionist and... What's it called? Not Now You See It. The Prestige. That's the
Now
one.
You See It.
It may as well be called that.
Was it Ed TV and The Truman Show?
We didn't I did watch The Truman Show in high school as well, but not
movie.
Ed TV. How much further could we possibly get off subject? Let's keep digging.
No,
How far can we
that's
get? Okay, back to Vertigo.
Okay, so we see him with his friend Midge, and he's like...
Is that what her name is? I never picked it up.
I'm pretty sure, because I was like, oh, that was a popular name back then, because I watched Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Right.
Her name is Midge. Anywho, he's like, oh, well, you and I, we used to be engaged for a couple weeks. And I was like, okay, I thought we were gonna revisit, like, this romance in the second half.
Nope.
No. He just, like, bops around, hangs out with her, they be chilling, and then... she, like, pulls up to his house and, like, watches the girl leave. And then she, like, paints herself in the painting.
Yeah, that was pretty freaky.
So I was like, oh, they're setting up that she's gonna be, like, some psycho girl. And, like...
Really? I thought the opposite.
He's gonna use her to, like, get over you know, his love dying.
Mm-hmm.
But no.
Nope.
After she was in him in the hospital, never seen or heard from again.
Pretty much. So
What's the point of her character at all then? Doesn't need it.
To wear cute glasses? I don't know.
Yeah, she was cute.
So going a little broader for a second, did you like it? Are you coming out with a smile on your face, or with a scowl, or, you know, with your hand up to the TV like the Drake meme, or what's going on?
I liked it, but I wanted more. And I think I've gotten more from other films in the future of cinema.
Yeah. What did you like about it?
I liked the crazy sequences of him, like, going mad. Like, the sort of the Mad Men shot of him falling. And, like, his face, like, glowing and floating.
Yeah. You can definitely
Stuff
see
like
where the Mad Men opening titles got their inspiration from.
Yeah,
like
that's
100%.
pretty clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted even more of that, and I think it was really well shot. It obviously had a higher budget than some of his other movies. I think it was better shot than The Birds.
Yes.
Maybe better shot than Psycho, but Psycho is a better told story.
Right. Well, Psycho also, they didn't really go into this in the Hitchcock film that we talked about, but I know that Psycho was shot in black and white for budgetary reasons.
Right.
And I had such a misconception about black and white films when I first started diving into slightly older films, because like some of the first movies that I saw from the 60s were Beatles' Hard Day's Night and Psycho. So then all of a sudden I was under this misconception of like, oh, movies were black and white in the 60s. They didn't get black and white they didn't get color movies until like the 70s. Meanwhile, there were color films in like the 50s and 40s, and it didn't occur to me until later that those movies were black and white to be cheap.
Right.
And I kind of wish they had touched on that in Hitchcock, the movie.
Yeah, that it was black and white instead.
Yeah.
This is a little unusual.
They just didn't even mention it.
No.
But I think that contributes to why it feels like Vertigo was better shot, just strictly because Psycho was black and white and lower budget.
I would say so, but I just, the stylistic flair of it felt like it was really going for something in its shots, whereas some other movies of that era can be a little more like using the shots to tell the story, but not necessarily to give like visual flair of its own. Mm-hmm. And I felt like this was really doing some interesting shots and rack focuses and framing and, you know, lighting choices, and I appreciated all those aspects of it. Yeah,
well, it you know, it like invented the Hitchcock zoom, you know, with the where you dolly in and then zoom out, or the opposite where you
so it's like a fast zoom kind of like yeah
they did that in Jaws
very effectively.
That was awesome. And so, you know, it's like inarguable that Vertigo was shot well, because it like pioneered this really famous technique.
So I think that shows Hitchcock at his best as a director, but the storytelling element of making it an interesting, well, it was very interesting, but it was a bit of a mess.
Right.
So in terms of being a cohesive story, but let's be honest, like even Psycho is a bit of a mess to me. I know like they always, I don't know, maybe he's just like the M. Night Shyamalan of his day, where he's like, I have to throw like a twist in there, even if it doesn't make sense, kind of thing.
I don't know if it was a twist. Both Psycho and Vertigo, I felt, had quite distinctive first and second halves.
Right, where it was like, here we've established what the world is, and now we're going to turn it on its head.
Right.
I didn't mind that. It definitely picked things up and made it more interesting to watch, like what's going to happen sort of thing. But it was still a bit messy. And the end, I don't know how I feel about the end. It seems like the logical conclusion, but
I don't think Hitchcock movies have strong endings.
No.
Because like
actually,
the Psycho ending was pretty good.
I really like the Psycho ending.
The North by Northwest ending was garbage. The Rope ending was fine. And Rear Window, as much as I love Rear Window, I don't even remember the ending.
I think...
Spoilers.
I think Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly hug or something. I don't know.
So you don't know either?
No, I think it was more like, all's well that ends well. You solved a murder. Yay.
Yay.
We're happy. Or something like that. I don't remember.
Right. Okay, so I guess I'll dip in a little bit to my thoughts.
Yeah.
Let's see, where do I start? So, I'll start with what I didn't like the first time. I did think back then, and I still think now, it is so slow paced.
It's pretty slow.
It's maybe like the most famous slow paced movie ever. And despite what my brother thinks, I am not inherently against slow paced movies. I don't tend to like slow paced movies more than fast paced movies that move along in a bit more of a clip and keep you invested.
Just needs to be well edited.
Yeah, but like some of those scenes of him just like following her and like driving around for minutes where nothing is happening and nobody is saying anything.
I agree.
I'm like, just cut it down.
That was the worst part of the movie, when he was first tailing her and she like goes to a flower shop and he's just like staring at her, looking at flowers, and then the grave. It took forever, like way too long.
Yeah, you could do that. You could do those same scenes in much less time.
Yeah,
I know he's a master of suspense, but there was nothing suspenseful about those scenes.
It kind of, if you're drawing it out too much, you're leaving nothing. It has to be like the proper pacing.
Right. Jimmy Stewart is terrible at tailing people, by the way. I mean, he's good at tailing people in that he was able to keep up with her, but like if she had just turned around at literally any point during the day, she would have seen him like 5 feet away. Like he's like, oh, she just parked? Let me park like 2 cars behind her.
Like in the museum, he was talking to the curator like right outside the door.
Yeah, they're like the only people in the room.
He's like, what's this painting? It's like, she's just like sitting there quietly.
Yeah, like that was totally within earshot. Come on.
Oh, what was even the point of that? He couldn't like just like peek over and see what the painting was? Like, I don't
know. Well, what was your take on the story?
I think I liked it.
You think you liked it? Okay.
But here's the thing. I think it was better executed in other places. Like, this isn't quite the same, but like Enemy has some similar vibes.
It's got some vibes, yeah.
Body doubles and that kind of thing.
Sure.
And that was sort of suspenseful because you have Jake Gyllenhaal. He like discovers he's got a body double, and like at least I wasn't expecting it going in. So I was like, oh, where's this movie going, kind of thing.
Right.
That would have been interesting.
The second half of the movie is basically the premise for the series finale of Teen Titans.
Okay. Interesting. I have no context to that.
It's like, well, spoilers for Teen Titans. I think I told you about this before. Like, a character briefly joins the Titans named Tara, and then she becomes a villain, and then she, like, sort of dies. And then in the last episode of the series, she shows up again as, like, a regular civilian, and Beast Boy's like, hey, you're back. You're here. I know you. And she's like, I don't know who you are. And I don't know what's going on with this.
That's right.
And whoever you think that I am, if I am this person or if I'm not, you just need to move on.
Yeah. That happened in Jane the Virgin, too. Her husband, she thought... Spoilers for Jane the Virgin.
We're spoiling it all!
Her husband, who she thought died of, like, a heart attack or something, she realizes is still alive, and this villain gave him amnesia, and he didn't remember his life with her, and she's like, hey, like, you're my husband, I like grieved you for years, and he's like, yeah, I really don't know who you are, I have like this whole other life over here, and she's like, all right, I guess I'm gonna move on, and even though we were married, that was like another lifetime ago, really, so I'll just let you move on with your life because you don't know who I am anymore.
Well, it sounds like the character went in a different direction than what Scotty ended up doing.
Well, that's because she was acting like a normal person instead of...
I don't think Jimmy Stewart's capable of that.
Instead of dressing someone up and being like, I want you to look exactly like this other person.
Right.
I mean, he didn't know that it was the person. Well, not in the beginning.
Okay, so here's the thing. I'll dive a little bit deeper into my second experience. So my first time watching, I thought it was so slow. I didn't like Jimmy Stewart, and I thought the first half was interesting enough to kind of keep me hooked, and then I hated the second half. Everything to do with Jimmy Stewart being like, oh, why don't you wear this gray suit here? Oh, why don't you look like with your hair dyed blonde there? I just I couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
But I think at the time, when I was 15 or 16, I guess I had trouble comprehending sort of the concept of an unlikable protagonist, or a protagonist that seems likable to start and then becomes unlikable. I don't know why.
Like an anti-hero kind of thing.
Well, I guess sort of, but I couldn't comprehend that, I guess. I guess I just felt sucked in by his character in the first half, and then I couldn't come to terms with his behavior in the second half, and it just made me mad.
Mm-hmm.
My second time watching, I had a very different experience for a couple of very, very important reasons.
Okay.
My second time watching, I actually really found the first half boring. Very, very boring.
Yeah, it's pretty slow.
And then I actually quite liked the second half.
They really could have cut the movie down a bit.
For sure. But I liked the second half a lot more this time. And I'll tell you exactly why.
Okay.
It is because I don't know how this happened. But the first time I watched it, I don't know. I can't imagine that it wasn't included in the version that I saw, because that would be insane. But the first time I watched it, somehow I completely missed the scene where she writes the letter to him detailing the whole plan, where she was the same woman and it was a plan to set her up, and it was a different woman. It was a different woman who died, and that he wasn't crazy and it was her and she still loves him. I somehow completely missed that. So my first time watching, I thought it was like in Teen Titans, where it's left ambiguous whether it is the same person. And so I was like, what is Jimmy Stewart's problem that he's just trying to make over this woman who's like a completely different woman? I guess I just wasn't paying full attention, because I guess I wrote it off early, and I missed a huge component of the plot. And then also, I didn't remember at all that towards the end, I didn't remember the ending at all, basically. And I didn't remember that he figures out the plot and then goes kind of even crazier. And I just had a completely different experience with the second half of the movie, to where my opinions were totally flipped. First time I saw it, I liked the first half and hated the second half. Second time I saw it, I hated the first half and I liked the second half.
It's interesting. To me, the second half was a lot more stylistic. Like, they were really going for it, and that's what I enjoyed about it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it went on too long, but it felt like the plot of something that would be in like a detective procedural show that I would watch. Like a 40-minute thing, like Monk or something, where it's like, oh, this girl fell off the building, but then there's like this identical girl, and oh, is it this girl? Oh no, it's a plot for murder or something like that. I could see that being interesting, like a really tight script. Like, here's the characters, here's the stakes, let's figure it out and then be done with it.
Right. I don't think it would have felt quite as long if they had cut out like a good 20-30 minutes from the first half that really didn't need to be there. I mean,
they could have established who this woman is and him tailing her, and, alluded to suicidal tendencies or, hysteria or whatever, without it being so long.
Right. Because, I went in with a really low bar, because I hated it so much the first time. So I was like, you know what? Whatever.
It is what it is.
Started it. The opening title sequence with those animations I thought was really nice.
Yeah, I was going to say, the first, 5 minutes of the movie, I'm like, this is awesome. Why doesn't Andrew like this movie? This is, this kicks butt, so far, with the mouth and the sequence and, the running on the roof and Jimmy Stewart's hanging off the roof and everything. That was all awesome. And then, after that, he's just, talking to his friend for like 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say, from the very beginning up until the scene where Jimmy Stewart's balancing the cane on his hand, perfect movie.
It really lost some steam and momentum. I wish they had introduced this character in like a different way. Because again, like they could have completely cut out his friend character. Like it really didn't make any sense.
But that first scene with the chase, nice and exciting. It provides a good starting point to go from. Like I said, those opening credits were really nice. Speaking of which, trivia number 1. The opening title sequence, designed by Saul Bass, makes this the first movie to use computer graphics.
It did look like really early computer graphics to me, with like the little swirly designs and stuff. It reminded me of like
a screensaver?
No, I was gonna say it reminded me of like James Bond opening sequences.
Right. But like in the 1950s, I don't even know, like I can't even comprehend the concept of making computer-generated graphics the 50s.
Because, like, I feel like they had to operate computers with, like, punch cards, and, like, you would have to program everything in by, like, pressing, like 8 buttons. Beep, boop, beep, boop, beep.
Right. And it would make that sound, really right? Hard.
Absolutely. That's mandatory.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool that it used computer graphics, and I think that sequence paid off. The dream sequence later, maybe not quite as cool. But
I like that they went for it.
Yeah, they were trying something. I was
here for the wackiness, and I wanted even more of it.
Yeah, but watching it again, those first 5 minutes or so with the opening titles and the opening scene, I was like, you know what? Maybe I was wrong about this. Maybe this movie slaps. And then the first half continued. And it was just like driving around, and oh, we're in love. You jumped into the bay.
Yeah, that was a little insane.
I was like legitimately starting to fall asleep.
Yeah.
But then once the second half hit, I was like, you know what? The first half was already so bad. How much worse can it get from here? But then I found myself getting like more and more interested the more it continued. And it was because of that pivotal scene where she explains the whole plot and how it is the same woman, and she just wants to love him more than anything, and she will commit herself to changing her appearance if it'll land him and give them a life together, and he just like can't get over his stupid crap.
Well, I don't understand the appeal of either of them. What do either of them have going for them?
Wow,
they
rude.
Want each other. Well, you know, we don't get to see really why they fall in love. They just are broken people that need each other.
I mean, how is that different than any other movie?
I mean, you know, in The Birds, they had like a meet cute, and they had like a rapport going where you would see like the chemistry that they have together.
You don't think that saving somebody from drowning in the San Francisco Bay is a meet cute? If that's not a meet cute, then I don't know what a meet cute is.
Well, I mean, the same thing happens in It's a Wonderful Life, where Jimmy Stewart is drowning and then his angel saves him.
Your point being?
Is that a meet cute?
Yeah, why not? Sure. Anything can be a meet cute.
I guess so.
Yeah. Napoleon and Rex Kwon Do, meet cute.
They have a limited interaction.
Still great.
Sure.
Movie chemistry at its finest.
Definitely.
Unlike Jimmy Stewart and Kim Novak.
She was a little bland. I could see why. I mean, it really picked up when she was playing the other half of that character. She was a little blank slate as Madeline, but as his girlfriend, she showed sort of a more interesting side.
Yeah, I think they knew what they were doing with that.
Yeah. At first I was like, yeah, she's like a human mannequin. She's just like standing around, walking, barely saying anything.
Right.
It felt like kind of like the dialogue was a bit forced. Like, I'm just speaking and I'm a pretty void.
Right.
Yeah.
But
the second half was good. It was weird because, you know, he was looking at all these girls that he thought looked like her.
Mm-hmm.
And then he looks at this brunette and I'm like, that doesn't really look like her.
Egg on your face.
Why is he following her? Well, I don't know. Something about her hair and the makeup and the clothes, like, I honestly believed it was, like, a different girl at first.
Right.
Until she, like, wrote the letter, I was like, that's a different girl.
Mm.
Why is he like obsessed with this girl? Like, I just couldn't see the
You didn't recognize her?
No, I couldn't see her likeness.
Okay,
really.
fair enough.
I don't know. At first, and then it became apparent when they revealed it.
Right. Well, speaking of the fact that there's little to no chemistry between the two, trivia number 2, there is a 25-year age difference between Jimmy Stewart and Kim Novak, who were 49 and 24 at the time in 1957.
In the film, she said she was 26. And I was like, 26? Like, that's young. Like, I'm not even 26 yet.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, this, Jimmy Stewart is super old.
Yep.
But it's the same with, like, all of those movies back then. Like, The Birds, Tippi Hedren must have been in her early 20s. And, like, Rod Taylor looks super old compared to her.
You're a lot better at remembering actor names than I am.
Well, I was just looking at the poster of it, like, today.
Right. So, in Vertigo, did you feel like Jimmy Stewart came across as old?
Just all the leading men of that era were older and all the women were younger. It was just what they did back then. Right.
Well, interestingly, trivia number 3, Alfred Hitchcock was embittered at the critical and commercial failure of this movie in 1958. He blamed this on Jimmy Stewart for, quote, looking too old to attract audiences anymore. Hitchcock never worked again with Jimmy Stewart, previously one of his favorite collaborators.
Wow. That's harsh.
Because he was in Rope, Rear Window, The Man Who Knew Too Much, probably more.
Probably.
End of an era.
Well, he had sort of grayish hair in this film. It was like a weird mix of like blonde and brown and gray.
Sure.
So I could see how they thought he looked too old.
Yeah.
It was kind of like odd in a way where it was like, why is this guy like not got like a partner at this age? Is there something wrong with it?
Well, he was engaged for a while.
To his friend that he just kind of pieces out on after
You could totally cut her out of the movie.
Like, seriously, like, what is she really adding?
What was the point?
Like, I wish she became the girlfriend in the second half and he like went crazy to try to make her into his image of Madeline. That would have been more interesting, I think. Right.
When we were watching Hitchcock, you may have noticed I laughed at a certain moment when Alfred Hitchcock was like talking about Psycho. He's like, oh, this isn't a romantic movie like Vertigo. And I was like, because I did not consider Vertigo to be a romantic movie at all. It deals with romance, but it does not feel romantic to me. All that felt forced and awkward.
I would agree with that. To me, it was like more of a mystery movie where we're figuring things out with the characters.
Mm-hmm. Which, during the first half, I was worried that it was going to feel a little too much like Chinatown, where like all the dialogue is just like people kind of running at the mouth and it's just like exposition and there's not really enough character to it.
It did remind me of Chinatown in a way where it was just long meandering scenes of following people.
Yeah, in the first half.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the second half, it's so strange how much more engaged I felt in the second half because I remember hating it so much the first time. But again, I think I was able to come to terms more with a character who seems one way and seems like you can trust him and seems like he's a nice guy, and then just, Harvey Dent syndrome, fall from grace, starts acting a little bit batty, and I was able to comprehend and appreciate it more.
It's an interesting character arc. It's it's like Walter White or any of those characters where it's like a slow progression to the other side.
Yeah. I don't think I had seen Breaking Bad at the time when I originally watched it, so.
Because that's kind of like the first, well, not the first, but one of
No, it's the first. Breaking Bad is the best ever. Nobody's done it before or since.
What I was going to say, it's one of the best examples of that arc.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was quite the first. I'm sure there was others. But.
For sure. But all that to say, I had a very different experience this time.
Well, I'm glad. I kind of thought since the bar was so low that you'd be like, yeah, it was pretty good, actually.
Well, I wasn't sure because that happens sometimes where the first, I had seen Blade Runner once or twice. And when I was younger, like teenagehood, and I disliked it both times. But at the time, I chalked it up to like, oh, maybe I'm just not old enough to understand some of these themes that are going on. Maybe I just don't get it yet. And then you and I watched it a couple months ago, and I was like, all right, I'm an adult. I'm going in with a semi-open mind, even though I really don't like this movie. I'm ready to like it if it throws stuff at me that is likable. And I hated it even more. I despised it.
I thought I was gonna decently like it since I had heard like some hype surrounding it. And I like Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford's the best.
Yeah. It was just such a convoluted plot.
Harrison Ford's the best, and I like Ridley Scott movies, and I liked the whole vibe that they were going for.
Neo-noir.
But I just felt like the script was crap.
It was. Yeah.
It didn't mean anything.
And we watched the director's cut, which was supposed to be like the definitive best version.
We watched the final cut.
Yeah, whatever the newest, most recent cut is what we watched, and that's supposed to be like the best version of the film.
We watched the final cut, which is supposedly like the proper vision for the story. Without the narration and without the extra ending and whatnot.
And it's still not.
And I still hated it.
Yeah, it was.
That's funny because I was looking it up afterwards, and I was reading about how much people hate the narration and how Harrison Ford didn't want to do it and it wasn't the original vision. And so I looked up a clip of the original narration that is supposedly terrible, and I was like, you know what? I think I might have liked the movie better with the narration, because with the narration it's clear that it's a send up to old noir films of like a detective walking around being like, I talked to this lady and she didn't know what was worth a damn, That's like a weird John Wayne impression, but you get what I'm saying, right?
But it's
like Dry Town.
It has to be the vision for the film. If he didn't do a good job with the narration, it's not gonna come off right. You know what I mean?
Well, Harrison Ford's quoted as saying that he didn't deliberately try to sandbag the narration. He tried to do a good job. He just didn't want to do it in the first place. And
you can feel his reluctancy.
I guess, but me personally, hearing that narration, I was like, oh, I see what they were going for here. And something was lost without this. To me. I know probably everybody who's a Blade Runner fan who's listening to this is going to disagree, but that's the vibe that I got,
Well, I'm interested to see the sequel, or I don't know what it actually is.
It's a sequel.
I'm excited to see the sequel then, to see how it could be executed in the best way.
Yeah. Much like Trainspotting 2, it's a sequel that it's definitely a sequel, and it just takes place like decades later. And also much like Trainspotting 2, I liked the sequel more than I liked the original.
I like
significantly.
I like both Trainspotting and Trainspotting 2. And Trainspotting is a better first film than Blade Runner because it makes sense.
Should we go back to talking about Vertigo or just keep moving forward?
I will say that I feel like parts of this film were inspiration for style Bible-wise and maybe story-wise for Last Night in Soho.
Okay, go on.
Following a character that admires someone and through that lens diving into madness.
Interesting.
And just the whole having like a tiny apartment in the city in a hotel in front of like a giant neon sign kind of thing, because Kim Novak, she had that great shot where she's like sitting in the green neon light, and then you see her silhouette. One of the best shots in the movie, in my opinion. So I feel like with Last Night in Soho, she's got like the red neon sign in the window, and she becomes obsessed with this girl that she's dreaming about, and stuff like that, and it makes her go mad.
That's an interesting take. Last Night in Soho is also another movie that I would be interested to rewatch, because I've significantly liked pretty much everything that Edgar Wright has put out. I would say at this point, after putting some thought into it, I would say he's my favorite director. But Last Night in Soho bummed me out a little bit So I just didn't think it was that good.
The problem is the trailer made it seem like it was something different. So that's what I was expecting.
You think?
To me, it made it seem like she was becoming the girl.
Right.
Like, when she went into the dream, it, like, made her become the girl. Whereas it was more like she was, like, because she was in the girl's old room, she was maybe, like, feeling the feelings that the girl was feeling or remembering some kind of memories of the girl.
So you thought it was going to be more fantastical, but it ended up being more psychological.
Yeah. I wanted it to be... Well, I knew it was going to be a murderess and, like, a murder mystery, but I wanted it to be more of that, where it was, like, the lines were starting to blur between her being the girl and her being herself.
Right.
And it really seemed like that in the beginning because she, like, cut her hair blonde and then she got, like, the cool mod code and stuff. And then it just kind of, like, ended there.
Well, interesting. Just thinking about the mystery aspect of that, I think... I'm rethinking it now, because I do think that the scene where Kim Novak lays out the whole plan in letter form was like a requirement for me enjoying the second half. But also, now I'm looking at it and thinking they kind of failed from a mystery standpoint, because, you know, Kim Novak as a brunette only reappears in the movie for like a few minutes before the twist is fully given away. And I think they maybe could have dropped some clues along the way.
Yeah, to make it actually mysterious.
Yeah, and prolonged that a little bit more and only had them reveal, like, towards the end. You know? Like, maybe the necklace gives it away.
Yeah, they laid out the cards too soon.
Yeah.
Maybe the cut that you watched actually did have the letter writing scene cut out, because I feel like that would almost make it, like, a stronger mystery, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I don't know. It's like, I swear that scene was not familiar to me at all.
It was too much of an exposition dump.
Yeah.
I think it was maybe either A, left better ambiguous because it was more of a suspense kind of thing. And, you know, cyclical, she ended up the same ways like the girl before her, wasn't really sure who was who kind of thing. I really would have liked if it was more of a mystery, where it's like he met the girl, he fell in love with the girl. First half, she dies, they plant clues, you know, oh, he sees the girl again, like, am I dreaming, am I crazy kind of thing. And then it's like, then we find out through, like, a flashback or something.
Sure.
I don't know. Or we don't find out at all. And it's left a mystery whether he's gone crazy or if this has really happened. I feel like that would have maybe been stronger to the themes they were presenting.
That was the way that I interpreted the movie the first time, and I hated it. Where you don't know if she's the same woman or not.
I like that better.
I don't know.
Because, it, you know, he didn't speak for like a whole year or something. He was driven mad by her dying. You know, he's driven mad by losing his fellow police officer. I think it would have made more sense, like, oh, is this all a dream or not?
Well, I think either way what we're landing on is that this is yet another example of a movie that probably could have done with one more rewrite. And just ironed out some of those plot points, maybe shifted some things around, trimmed the fat a bit, and then it might have been really, really good.
It didn't need to be 2 hours. I feel like too many movies of that time period just go on longer than they need to. They just extend sequences of, like, someone driving in the car, not saying anything, walking around, going to a store, no dialogue, really drawn out scenes. Whereas I feel like in modern cinema, there's less of just meandering scenes. In general, editing is a lot tighter, where you will be meandering on a scene, but it'll be for a purpose. And if not, why is it in there? Kind of thing. Usually. Yeah.
Again, I don't have a problem with slow-paced movies, but I think if you're going to pace a movie very slowly, at least make the slow parts entertaining. Yeah. Because if it's literally just, like, driving around or just, like
in
if
silence,
it's nothing, it's like, why are you including it? Ask yourself why.
No music or, like, anything. Like, it's just we're watching someone driving. It's
even
so
with music, it's like, that's not, like... Because what I found myself doing during those scenes is that he would start driving around and there would be music and no dialogue, and he would turn this way and turn that way, and my eyes would start wandering from the TV, and I'd start looking around the room and looking at this and looking at that and looking at you and then thinking about other stuff. And then eventually I would snap back into reality and look at the screen again, and he's still driving. And I'm like, how long was I drifting off into space? Have we been here for like 5 minutes? What is happening? Why is this still in the movie?
I feel like if it's not telling something about the character or moving the plot forward, then what's the point of having it in, really?
Right. It seems like we both still have some mixed feelings about this movie. I don't know. Did you love it? Did you like it? Or are you kind of eh?
I liked it. I felt like it had a lot of great things going for it that I think a lot of other directors and creative people were inspired by and ran with.
Yeah, for sure. I certainly liked it more than the first time. I think the second half was legitimately interesting and I liked it. The first half had so much fat that could have been trimmed. But I don't know. I'm still like hesitant to give it like a positive review because I just don't know if I really enjoyed my time with it. I don't know if I could say I was having fun watching it or like, I don't know.
It was a decent time. It's not like the worst experience I've had. It was certainly dull in some parts.
I can tell you one person who feels like it may have been the worst experience they've had.
Someone on IMDb.
And that is an IMDb review that we looked at a couple of months ago. I read this to Hannah. I left out spoilers, but I'll read the whole thing now. It's a review from 2012, and it just gave us a nice little chuckle.
It's pretty funny.
And it is a review by F-Odds-1 on August 5th, 2012. Headline, A Masterpiece of Torpor. Which, I don't know if you know what the word torpor means.
Yes, of course. No.
I did not. I had to look it up.
Mm-hmm.
Torpor, noun, a state of physical or mental inactivity.
Okay.
So shots fired. A masterpiece of torpor.
Sure.
So a masterpiece of physical or mental inactivity.
Yep.
So this is how F-Odds-1 feels about Vertigo. And I quote, "It staggers credulity to read that this dull, plodding film with its embarrassingly silly plot has now been rated as the greatest movie of all time. I have watched it 3 times. In the early 60s, when it was first released in the UK. I guess I should be reading this with a UK accent, but I'm not going to torture our listeners with
voice.
that. Yeah. Again, some 10 years ago, once again, last night. Nothing has changed, period, full stop. Vertigo doesn't merit high rating, even among Hitchcock's prolific output. To elevate it to all-time supreme status is an unspeakable act of self-pomposity from the critics concerned. A film like Vertigo depends almost entirely on raising the viewer's interest in its characters. Disappointing, then, that its 2 principals play their roles as if they're half asleep on drugs.
Yeah, that's fair.
James Stewart has many times played with success the seemingly slow-witted, slow-moving character who's aware of a lot more than it appears. In Vertigo, this Stewart stock persona is inappropriate. One wonders if they first shot the scene where he's mute, staring and unresponding in the hospital, and he decided to continue in this mode, but mouthing the script lines as they came along. How anyone could begin to fall in love with such a frigid, boring personality, as played by Kim Novak, is beyond comprehension. She is consistently outperformed by trees, buildings, and props throughout the piece. Far from conveying an intriguing, sexually arresting character, she leaves the viewer marveling that nobody thought to save budget by substituting a tailor's mannequin. Had Vertigo been directed by anyone without Hitchcock's reputation, one that's deserved, but which, most unusually, seems to encourage enthusiasts to believe he never makes a clunker, it would have been written off as poor stuff. Indeed, it was correctly regarded as mediocre when it first came out. It isn't a bad film, in the sense of god-awful, laughably inept. It's just so far from good that people with normally functioning eyes and ears will shrug and say, ho-hum.
Yeah. It has some good things going for it, but it was a little boring.
That review is definitely how I felt my first time watching.
I mean, she was kind of mannequin-esque, especially in the first half. And I thought it was very funny, him saying that he continued being mute, but just mouthed the dialogue.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I've seen Jimmy Stewart now in 3 things. I saw him in Rope where he was fine, but maybe a little bit too Jimmy Stewart. I saw him in Rear Window where he was a low level of Jimmy Stewart that I actually couldn't even remember if it was Jimmy Stewart. And then we saw him in It's a Wonderful Life, where it seemed like it was kind of tailor-made to his Jimmy Stewart-ness. So that was okay. But his Jimmy Stewart-ness was like factor 10 in this. And I still find it a little hard to swallow, but I was able to come to terms this time with him being a little doo-doo head towards the end of the film. Is.
Well, it's also just the patriarchalness of men in the 50s just feeling like they
own the place,
talk to women however they want, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And to me, it's such a trope, Jimmy Stewart just getting like hamishly mad. Mm-hmm. Like, come on now. It's like, Lulu, you gotta do this, the pedals or whatever. So I don't know.
Yeah. So rating out of 10, I have to imagine last time I either gave it a 5 or below. Probably belongs in the bargain bin at 5 below. Hey-oh. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I don't think Canadians will get that joke. But anyway.
It's like a dollar store.
It's like a dollar store. It's a $5 store or below. But I think this time, I don't know if I'll give it a 7. Maybe like a really light 7, but probably more like a 6. What about you?
Stylistically, it had some better things going from it with the birds.
Mm-hmm.
But in how the birds was slow-paced, this was also slow-paced, and it also had a character that you could just, like, almost completely write out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Susan Planchet's character, who played the school teacher. She, like, talks about, like, this romance with Rod Taylor, but she, like, never really actually interacts with Rod Taylor. It's just, like, tell, don't show about, like, their past history.
I would agree with that, but I do think that Suzanne Planchet's character had more reason for existing in the birds.
Yeah. I mean, she obviously had a good relationship with Kathy, the girl, so it made her death somewhat sad.
Yeah. But she got resurrected and married Bob Newhart, so it's all okay.
Yeah, it's all okay.
And then she got really old and started to run a bathhouse in Japan.
Whereas Midge just, like, peaced out. She's like, all right, my friend was mute for a year. Goodbye.
Yeah. It was based on a novel, I think. So maybe the character had more significance in the novel. But, I mean, if you're going to cut her down, cut her all the way down.
Yeah, only keep her to where it's necessary, I would say.
Right. So what would you give it out of 10? Or 5? Or 1. You could give it a 0.4 out of 1.
Now that's just wacky.
Well, speaking of that, I just looked at it. Yes. So my previous rating for it was 4 out of 10, which is very low, or 2 out of 5 if you go that way.
Just because you detested the experience so much, you're like, I'm never watching this again.
That's right.
Kind of thing.
Well, I think I knew that eventually I would give it a second chance, just because it's so almost universally liked that I knew I would had to give it another chance.
Well, I'm just wondering, like, if this is one of the Hitchcock movies that everyone talks about, are the other ones just, like, not even watchable?
What, like before? Like
just
earlier
like
50s? And
some of the lesser known films.
Maybe.
If everyone talks about, like, The Birds, which is okay, Vertigo, which is okay, Psycho, which is good, you know,
North by Northwest.
I don't know, but you said that it's kind of meh. Like, are the other ones just, like, dead on arrival?
I guess. I don't know. People had lower barometers for good films back then, I guess.
Maybe.
I don't know.
But maybe just tastes have changed. You know, we have so many different things that we can draw experiences from now.
Yeah.
in like the 2020s compared to the 1950s.
Yeah.
It was a lot more limited in the kinds of stories you could tell.
Maybe there should be a Vertigo remake.
Would that be good though?
I don't know.
I would
It's gotta be better than this.
I would like to see like maybe like an homage to Vertigo. Like not like
There's got to be a Psych episode that does Vertigo. Come on.
I was gonna say, I think there is a Send Up episode where they homage Hitchcock films in general, but I don't know if it's like word for word. I would like sort of another film where it's like, we're inspired by the old style of suspense cinema, and we're making a tale that's like homaging 1950s, 60s mystery and suspense. That would be interesting. I would like that. And that's what I thought last night Soho was doing, was they were drawing from like a 1960s world and creating like mystery and suspense, but drawing in like a modern flair.
Right. So I definitely liked it more this time, but I think there's still room for improvement. So I'll give it a 6 out of 10, 3 out of 5.
And I guess it was on par with my experience with The Birds, I think. And what did I give The Birds? Like a 7?
I don't know. I didn't write it down.
I think a 7.
You have to go back and listen to our episode.
I'm going to say 7.
Okay, well, what do we have our sights set on next? We talked about that TV movie, The Girl, but I think we might be a bit Hitchcocked out at this point.
Maybe.
We did we didn't watch them all at once, but kind of a triple feature, back to back.
I would love to watch some more quirky movies. I'm interested in the Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers film that's out. It seems kind of like an homage to Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah. We have on the horizon to see Lightyear because I'm such a Toy Story fan.
And Elvis is out.
We're looking at seeing Elvis with my dad for his B-Day.
I would say we're decently big fans of good biopics. So I'm interested.
Music biopics in general.
Yeah.
I am
like Rocket Man.
Very much get behind.
Yeah, so, and because we're not the biggest of Elvis fans, maybe it'll be better because we won't be like, that's not how that was or whatever. You know what I mean? If they did like a Beatles biopic, you'd be like,
I'd be
that's
all
not
over
that.
I'd be like, no, hey, his tie didn't look like that at that shoot. No, he was wearing
it would be too cringe, I think.
No, he was wearing the medium wash jeans that day, not the light wash. Yeah.
So I think we're at the appropriate level of fans where it's like, we appreciate him, but we appreciate him from afar.
I think that was the same for us going into Rocket Man. We're like, we both liked Elton John enough, but weren't like head over heels for him. My mom was head over heels for him, and that's why we watched it with her. But then afterwards, we were like, yeah, Elton John.
So good. I became
music.
a bigger fan of Elton John after watching that.
Exactly, yeah. That's what I'm hoping happens with the Elvis movie.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
We'll see.
That's the thing about the movies that we watch is that, I can't remember if I explained this already, but so much of our relationship is like showing each other things that we've seen in our past that's like, oh, you haven't seen this movie yet? I love this movie. I got to show you this movie. And because we're, we are such movie buffs and we have so many of those to show each other, we primarily focus on watching older movies. We don't get out to the theater that often, but I think we're in a moment in time here where there's a couple of newer movies on the horizon that we're interested in seeing. And so it looks like we're going for a newer movie next. I kind of like that about, sorry, I'll let you go in a second, but I kind of like that about our podcast because our friends Carl and Gabe do another movie podcast. Carl and Gabe Go to the Movies. And I like that they focus on new movies where we watch older movies, so it doesn't feel like we're treading on the same ground too much. I don't know if they'll do episodes on Elvis and Lightyear and Chip and Dale.
I think they'll touch on it briefly.
But, yeah.
What I was going to say was, normally, unless like something is really grabbing us, like Elvis or something, we don't go see every movie that comes out. Like some people will, see every Oscar movie that year. Whereas we're like, there's maybe like one movie I'm interested in.
Right.
in Oscar season, and then we don't really bother watching the rest. Whereas I feel like we're playing catch up to good cinema. I would rather be like, all right, this film has been beloved for like 60 years. We should watch this because people keep on coming back to it, and it's not just like a forgettable movie that in 10 years no one's going to think about.
This is exactly the same way that I feel about video games. Is, people go nuts over the newest video games that are releasing that are like, 60, 70, 80 bucks. And I'm like, why am I going to pay for that when it's brand new and it's at its most expensive, when there's games from the 90s that I haven't even touched yet that I can get for, let's just say, significantly cheaper? Mm-hmm. I got to catch up. Why bother paying the high price when there's so much that I haven't experienced yet?
Mm-hmm. I hear you. I really do love the cinema experience, though. And I really wish we would go to our retro cinema near us more often and see more like classic films more often. Yeah,
they don't play classics that often, though. They play...
Well, we saw The Exorcist.
And that wasn't even that good, in our opinion.
No, but I didn't love that film, but I loved the movie watching experience.
Sure.
Of being in a cinema in October on like a date night. It was a great experience.
I like going to the movies a lot. Mm-hmm. The fact is, the movies that are being put out in theaters haven't stood the test of time yet. They're brand new. Mm-hmm. And even if they get good reviews, that doesn't mean that they're going to have like great lastability, So it's like, I don't know, what's an example of a movie that came out in the past
Crash
little while? Crash.
Well, okay. It's kind of like a memeable sort of thing. Is Crash won Best Picture, but it was up against like other great movies that year, like Pulp Fiction, that probably should have won because they're actually have lasted in the cultural zeitgeist, whereas Crash, not so much.
Right. Anyway, that's my point, is like, why am I going to spend top dollar for movies that there isn't even like a concrete public opinion of yet, when there's still so many like certified classics out there that we haven't touched. True. And that's kind of mainly why we don't see too many new movies. Mm-hmm. But I am such a big Toy Story fan, so I'm interested in Lightyear. Chip 'n Dale, I think, is on Disney Plus, so it's not exactly going to cost us an arm and a leg to see it.
It's intriguing to me.
Yeah, I'm interested. I'm not the biggest Andy Samberg fan, but I don't inherently dislike Andy Samberg. I just have yet to see Andy Samberg in anything that I liked.
That's fair. I mean, his personality is kind of hard. It's kind of like Adam Sandler. It's like you need him in the right thing. Well,
exactly. I feel the same way about him. I do not inherently dislike Adam Sandler. In fact, I quite like him in some roles. Mm-hmm. But there's some stuff that he just sucks in, and there's some stuff that he's really good in.
Mm-hmm. I think that's, for most people. Like Jimmy Stewart or, the list goes on.
Well, anyway, I think we should wrap up.
Sure.
Okay. So, hoping to see Lightyear and Elvis in the next week or so. I'm not really expecting to love Lightyear. Just based on the trailer,
might be childish.
It looks a little childish with the cat. I'm just going to see it because it's Buzz Lightyear and it's Toy Story and it's my thing.
Might be a fun time at least.
But I do have high expectations. Well, not expectations, but high hopes for Elvis. I mean, Tom Hanks is in it. He can do... Well, maybe I shouldn't say he can do no wrong. I feel like that'll jinx it, but I love Tom Hanks. Hopefully he'll save it.
He puts in a good performance most of the time.
Yeah.
I've yet to see him be like in a real stinker, I would say.
So, either way, I'm excited for those, and we'll report back on the next episode.
Sounds good.
Thanks so much for listening.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.